Have you ever shared something deeply personal, only to lie awake that night with a knot in your stomach, wishing you could somehow take back your words? That sinking feeling when you realize you've given away a piece of yourself to someone who didn't truly deserve it? I certainly have. And if you're nodding right now, you're far from alone. There's something about crossing that 60-year threshold that makes us yearn for connection, for understanding, sometimes leading us to share parts of ourselves that would be better protected. I've spent years listening to the stories of men and women in their 60s, 70s, and beyond. Behind closed doors and quiet conversations, they confess their regrets about sharing too much with the wrong people. I thought I was building bridges. One 78-year-old gentleman told me, his voice barely above a whisper. Instead, I was giving away the keys to my peace of mind. Here's what so many of us discovered too late. Not everyone has earned the right to know your full story. Not everyone deserves access to your vulnerabilities, your finances, your deepest wounds. In a world that constantly urges us to open up and be authentic, there's profound wisdom in knowing when to keep certain doors closed, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. Today, I want to share with you 5 specific things that you should never freely share after 60. These aren't just random opinions. They're hard-earned lessons from those who learned the painful way that some things, once spoken, can never be unheard. And more importantly, I'll show you how protecting these aspects of your life isn't about isolation or distrust. It's about creating the space for true peace in your golden years. Let's start with the first thing many of us share too quickly, often before we realize the potential consequences. Let me tell you about Martha. At 68, Martha thought she found a new friend in her watercolor class. Someone who listened, who seemed to understand the challenges of aging. Over cups of tea, Martha shared stories about her past mistakes. Financial troubles during her divorce, conflict with her eldest daughter that took years to heal, moments of weakness she wasn't proud of. It felt good to unburden herself, to be truly seen. 3 weeks later, at a community gathering, Martha overheard the same friend embellishing those private stories, adding details that were never true, using Martha's vulnerable moments as entertaining anecdotes. Poor Martha, she heard her say, always making the same mistakes over and over. The betrayal stung like a physical blow. This is what happens when we forget a fundamental truth. Not everyone deserves access to your story. Not everyone has earned the right to know your weaknesses, your regrets, your private struggles. It's a lesson many of us learn too late in life, after the damage has been done. I've seen it happen countless times. We reach our 60s, 70s, and beyond, and something in us yearns for deeper connection. We've lived long enough to accumulate meaningful stories. We want to be understood, to be known. And so, we share parts of ourselves that would be better protected. Not because sharing itself is wrong, but because we share with the wrong people at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. The first thing you should never freely share after 60 is your weaknesses and past mistakes. Now, I'm not suggesting you pretend to be perfect. We've all made mistakes. Poor decisions, missed opportunities, words we wish we could take back. The wisdom of age comes partly from acknowledging these missteps. But there's a vast difference between acknowledging your mistakes and offering them up as conversation fodder. When you share your vulnerabilities with someone who hasn't earned your trust, you hand them ammunition they may one day use against you. You give them power to remind you of your worst moments, to define you by your failures rather than your growth. You allow them to see you through the lens of who you were, not who you become. Martha learned this the hard way. I thought I was building a friendship, she told me later. Instead, I was building a case against myself. Now, when the urge to share arises, Martha asks herself a simple question. Has this person demonstrated over time that they're trustworthy with my story? If the answer isn't a clear yes, she keeps certain chapters to herself. The second thing you should guard closely is your financial information. James, a retired engineer I've known for years, discovered this truth at 72. Recently widowed, James was flattered when a younger neighbor began stopping by regularly, bringing occasional meals and offering to help with household tasks. During these visits, the neighbor would casually ask questions about James's retirement, his investments, and whether his house was paid off. It seemed innocent enough, James recalled. I thought she was just making conversation, maybe even learning from my experience. Soon, she was suggesting investment opportunities, mentioning a nephew who worked in finance who could help James make his money work harder. Before long, James had invested $30,000 in what turned out to be a complete scam. The neighbor disappeared and the money was gone. Financial predators often target older adults, not just because we may have accumulated assets, but because they count on our generosity and sometimes our loneliness, making us vulnerable. They know that many of us were raised in an era when talking about money wasn't considered impolite. It was simply not done at all. They use our discomfort with financial discussions to their advantage. But it's not just outright scams we need to worry about. Even well-meaning family members and friends can develop expectations if they know too much about your financial situation. If they believe you're financially comfortable, you may become the first person they turn to when they need a loan or help with a major purchase. Your resources, which you spend decades building to secure your own future, can quickly become viewed as a family emergency fund. I've learned to be purposefully vague, says Patricia, a 75-year-old retired teacher. When people ask how I'm doing financially, I just say, I'm managing. It's honest. I am managing, but it doesn't invite further questions or create expectations one way or the other. This brings us to the third thing you should keep private: the conflicts in your relationships. We all face challenges with spouses, children, siblings, or friends. When those tensions arise, it's natural to seek perspective, to want reassurance that you're not overreacting or missing something important. But sharing relationship conflicts, particularly with mutual acquaintances, almost always backfires. Eleanor learned this painfully at 65. After a particularly heated argument with her husband of 40 years, she poured her heart out to a close friend over lunch. She shared decades of frustrations, revealed intimate details about their communication breakdown, and even questioned whether their marriage had been a mistake. It felt cathartic in the moment, like lancing a wound. What Eleanor didn't anticipate was how this would permanently change her friend's perception of her husband. 6 months later, when the marital rough patch had smoothed, Eleanor noticed her friend still treated her husband with barely concealed coldness. Family gatherings became awkward. Group dinners are filled with tension. Though Eleanor had moved forward, her friend remained frozen in that moment of confidence, forever seeing her husband through the lens of Eleanor's worst description of him. I robbed my husband of the right to be seen fairly, Eleanor told me with regret in her eyes. And I robbed my friend of what would have been an uncomplicated relationship with both of us, all because I needed a vent for an hour. When you share relationship conflict with others, you're not just telling your story. You're telling someone else's story without their permission. You're creating a narrative about your spouse, your adult child, or your sibling that they cannot defend or contextualize. And unlike professional counselors who maintain confidentiality and objectivity, friends and family members cannot unhear what you shared. They will carry those stories forward, often long after you've reconciled or moved on. If you need perspective on relationship challenges, and we all do sometimes, consider speaking with a counselor, therapist, or spiritual advisor who's bound by confidentiality. These professionals can offer guidance without becoming entangled in the relationship itself. They won't be sitting across from your spouse at Thanksgiving dinner, silently judging them based on your worst moments together. The fourth thing to protect closely is your deep pain and trauma. Many of us carry wounds from earlier chapters in our lives, childhood difficulties, betrayals, losses that cut to the bone. By the time we reach our 60s, we've often developed perspective on these experiences. We understand how they shaped us, how we survived them, perhaps even how they strengthened us. In the natural desire to make meaning of our suffering, we might feel compelled to share these stories. Robert, a 78-year-old Vietnam veteran, spent decades avoiding discussions of his war experiences. The memories were too raw, the images too haunting. But as he aged, he felt an increasing urge to ensure these stories weren't lost, to share the hard-earned wisdom they contained. He began speaking more openly about his time in combat, first with family members, then with a wider circle. What he discovered was that while some listeners could receive these stories with appropriate gravity, others became uncomfortable, changing the subject or offering platitudes that diminished his experience. Worse still, some seemed almost voyeuristic, pressing for graphic details that left Robert feeling exploited rather than understood. I realized I needed to be selective, Robert explained. These memories aren't just stories. They're sacred ground. Not everyone removes their shoes before walking on sacred ground. When we share our deepest pain with someone who doesn't know how to hold it properly, we risk being wounded twice. First by the original trauma, and then by the careless response to our vulnerability. We also risk having those experiences simplified or sensationalized, turned into anecdotes that others repeat without understanding their full significance. This doesn't mean you should never share difficult experiences. Processing trauma through selective sharing can be healing. Organizations like the Veterans History Project or StoryCorps provide structured ways to share life experiences while maintaining dignity. Support groups for specific challenges, grief, illness, addiction recovery, create spaces where painful stories are understood in their proper context. The key is discernment. Ask yourself, why am I sharing this particular story with this particular person at this particular time? Am I seeking healing, or am I unconsciously searching for validation? Will this person know how to receive this story with the care it deserves? Sometimes, the wisest choice is to honor your experiences by protecting them from those who cannot appreciate their depth. The fifth and final thing to guard closely after 60 is, perhaps surprisingly, your future plans and dreams. You might wonder why dreams need protection. Shouldn't we share our aspirations? Invite others into our vision for the future? The answer is both yes and no, and knowing the difference requires wisdom. David's story illustrates why. At 81, after a lifetime of putting everyone else's needs before his own, David decided to fulfill a childhood dream of learning to play the piano. He signed up for lessons, purchased a small keyboard for his apartment, and began practicing daily. The joy it brought him was palpable, until he made the mistake of sharing his new passion at a family gathering. At my age, his son-in-law laughed. Don't you think it's a little late to become a musician? His daughter chimed in with practical concerns. Dad, those lessons are expensive and you're on a fixed income. A brother-in-law added, my neighbor tried that after retirement, gave it up after 3 months, said his fingers just wouldn't cooperate anymore. By dessert, David's enthusiasm had deflated entirely. Though he continued his lessons privately, he never mentioned them again to his family. I learned that some dreams are like seedlings, he told me. They need protection from the elements until they're strong enough to withstand criticism. When we share our plans and dreams prematurely, particularly those that might seem unconventional for our age, we expose them to judgment from people who may not share our vision. Their concerns, often masked as practicality or care, can extinguish our enthusiasm before it has a chance to grow into action. Their doubts can become our doubts. Their fears can become our limitations. Sarah, a 74-year-old widow, learned to approach dreams differently. When she decided to sell her home of 30 years and travel the country in an RV, she kept her plans private until every detail was arranged. She researched thoroughly, took driving courses, joined online communities of senior travelers, and even rented an RV for a week to ensure she could handle it. Only when the house was on the market and the RV purchased did she announce her decision to friends and family. By then, it wasn't a plan they could talk me out of. It was a reality they had to accept, Sarah explained with a mischievous smile. Instead of giving me reasons why I couldn't do it, they had to shift to supporting how I was already doing it. This approach, nurturing dreams privately until they're sturdy enough for public scrutiny, isn't deception. It's self-preservation. It acknowledges that even well-meaning loved ones may project their own fears onto our aspirations. They may worry that change is dangerous, that failure will be devastating, that we're too old to adapt to new circumstances. These concerns come from love, but they can still clip our wings just as effectively as deliberate discouragement. Now that we've explored these 5 areas, weaknesses and past mistakes, financial information, relationship conflicts, deep pain and trauma, and future plans and dreams, let me offer 3 essential lessons that emerge from these stories. First, don't expect repayment. Live for yourself. For much of our lives, we're conditioned to put others first. Children, spouses, employers, and communities. We measure our worth by what we give, by how well we meet others' expectations. But in this season of life, We have opportunity, perhaps for the first time, to live from the inside out rather than the outside in. This doesn't mean becoming selfish. It means recognizing that your privacy, your peace of mind, and your sense of dignity are valuable beyond measure. You don't need to bare your soul to prove your worth or earn a connection. You have inherent value that requires no explanation or exposure. Second, don't complain. Choose what brings peace to your heart. When we share selectively, focusing on what brings light rather than dwelling on darkness, we create space for genuine joy. This isn't about toxic positivity or denying real challenges. It's about understanding that where we place our attention shapes our experience. When we constantly rehearse our wounds, regrets, and worries, particularly with people who cannot help us transform them, we remain trapped in those narratives. When we choose instead to direct our conversations toward what inspires gratitude, purpose, and possibility, we create new neural pathways that actually change how we experience our lives. Third, care for your health and soul. They are your true assets in old age. Your well-being depends not just on what you eat or how you move, but on the boundaries you maintain. Emotional boundaries, knowing what to share, when and with whom, are as essential to your health as physical checkups and proper nutrition. The ability to maintain appropriate privacy while still engaging meaningfully with others isn't a social skill. It's a survival skill. It protects your nervous system from unnecessary activation, shields you from exploitation, and preserves your energy for what truly matters. Martha, Eleanor, James, Robert, David, and Sarah each discovered through trial and error that discretion isn't about keeping secrets. It's about being intentional with their stories. It's about recognizing that not every thought needs to be spoken, not every feeling needs to be processed publicly, and not every dream needs immediate validation from others. As they move through their 60s, 70s, and beyond, they learn that there's immense power in selective silence, not the silence of suppression, but the silence of self-knowing. They discovered that when they shared less with the crowd, they had more to offer to those few precious souls who had earned their complete trust. Their relationships became deeper, not despite their newfound boundaries, but because of them. This journey toward wise discretion isn't always smooth. We make mistakes. We share too much in moments of vulnerability. We misjudge someone's trustworthiness. But each misstep teaches us something valuable about ourselves, about others, and about the delicate art of human connection at this stage of life. There's a quiet wisdom that comes with age, a wisdom that whispers, "Not everyone deserves your story." As I've shared these 5 areas to protect, I hope you recognize moments from your own life, perhaps times when sharing too much left you feeling exposed, misunderstood, or even betrayed. Those experiences weren't failures on your part. They were teachers, showing you the profound value of your inner world. At 60 and beyond, we don't need to announce our vulnerabilities to prove our authenticity. We don't need to expose our financial situation to demonstrate our success or struggles. We don't need to broadcast our relationship conflicts, relive our deepest traumas, or subject our dreams to public opinion. What we need more than anything is the courage to honor our own boundaries. This isn't about building walls. It's about creating sacred space around the parts of yourself that deserve protection. It's about recognizing that privacy isn't secrecy, it's self-respect. When you carefully choose what to share and with whom, you aren't being less honest. You're being more intentional. You're honoring the complexity of your life by ensuring that your stories land in hands gentle enough to hold them. If something in today's conversation has touched your heart, perhaps you know someone else who might benefit from these reflections. Share this video with them. Let them know they're not alone if they've ever regretted sharing too much. Remind them that at this beautiful stage of life, they have earned the right to reveal themselves selectively, to save their most precious stories for those who have proven themselves worthy of such gifts. And please, leave a comment below sharing your own wisdom about what's worth protecting as we age. Because while I've been speaking today, I've also been listening to the unspoken understanding between us that some of life's most meaningful truths are those we learn through living, through loving, and yes, sometimes through losing. But we never lose when we learn to honor the sacred territory of our own hearts.